Breaking. Hamas considers ICRC aid for Israeli hostages in Gaza amid starvation crisis. A dire humanitarian crisis is unfolding in Gaza, where the lines between survival and starvation blur for millions. But here's where it gets controversial. Hamas, the group controlling the enclave, has recently signaled openness to the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, delivering food and medical aid to Israeli captives held in the territory. This shift comes after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu publicly urged the Geneva-based organization to intervene, citing what he called a systematic starvation of hostages. Yet, Hamas's conditional acceptance raises questions. Is this a genuine offer to alleviate suffering, or a calculated move to shift blame for the ongoing crisis? Let's unpack the tangled web of claims, demands, and unmet needs that define this situation. The conversation began when Palestinian groups released harrowing videos last week, showing 2 Israeli captives in Gaza visibly weakened by hunger. These images, which Netanyahu described as proof of Hamas's lie of starvation, have sparked global outrage. In response, Hamas's Qassam brigades, through their spokesperson Abu Obaida, stated that captives eat what our fighters and all our people eat, emphasizing that no special privileges would be granted. However, they added a critical caveat. The ICRC's aid efforts would require humanitarian corridors to be opened permanently for food and medicine to reach all Palestinians, not just captives. This demand, while framed as a humanitarian necessity, also serves as a bargaining chip, linking aid to broader political concessions. The ICRC, for its part, has condemned the conditions in which hostages are held, calling the videos stark evidence of life-threatening situations. Yet the organization faces its own challenges. It has not been able to visit Palestinian detainees in Israeli custody since October 2023, and its recent statement about a PRCS staff member killed in a clearly marked building in Khan Yunis highlights the risks aid workers face. The ICRC's silence on who was responsible for that attack adds another layer of ambiguity to an already volatile scenario. Meanwhile, the families of Israeli captives have grown increasingly desperate. They accuse Netanyahu of prioritizing a military resolution over their loved ones' lives, arguing that the ongoing bombardment and siege are pushing captives closer to death. With fewer than 50 hostages believed to still be alive, their plea for a ceasefire and aid access grows more urgent. And this is the part most people miss. The crisis isn't just about captives. The United Nations has warned that 1 million women and girls in Gaza are now starving, a statistic that underscores the scale of the humanitarian disaster. Recent reports confirm at least 175 deaths from starvation, including a 17-year-old boy who weighed just 25 kilograms before dying. The numbers tell a grim story. Only 36 aid trucks entered Gaza last week, while 22,000 waited outside. How can a solution emerge from such a fractured landscape? The ICRC's call for cooperation from all parties is a start, but it's clear that no single organization can bridge the divide. As the world watches, the question remains, will political willpower outpace the human cost of inaction? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe aid can be delivered without a ceasefire, or is this a battle for survival that demands a complete overhaul of the status quo? Hamas offers aid to hostages in Gaza if Israel halts airstrikes. Here's a development that could reshape the entire Gaza crisis. Hamas has just announced they're willing to coordinate humanitarian aid for the hostages they're holding, but there's a massive catch that has everyone talking. The militant group made this unprecedented offer on Sunday, stating they would work directly with the Red Cross to deliver assistance to the captives in their custody. But here's where it gets controversial. Hamas is demanding that Israel completely halt all airstrikes and establish permanent humanitarian corridors before any coordination begins. This proposal comes after Hamas released a deeply disturbing video showing Israeli hostage Eviatar David in what can only be described as skeletal condition, digging what he says will be his own grave. The stark contrast between David's emaciated frame and the normal-sized arm of his captor, visible in the footage, has sent shockwaves through the international community. According to Israeli intelligence, approximately 50 hostages remain in Gaza's underground tunnels and hiding spots, with officials believing only 20 are still alive after nearly 2 years of captivity. What makes this situation even more heart-wrenching is that humanitarian organizations have been completely blocked from accessing these prisoners, leaving families with virtually no information about their loved ones' conditions. The video release triggered immediate outrage from major world powers, with France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States all condemning Hamas's treatment of the hostages. The international response was so intense that the UN Security Council scheduled an emergency session for Tuesday morning specifically to address the hostage crisis. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded by reaching out to the International Committee of the Red Cross, requesting immediate humanitarian assistance for the captives during a conversation with the organization's local delegation head. But here's the part most people are missing. While Hamas talks about humanitarian coordination, the broader crisis in Gaza continues to spiral out of control. 6 more Palestinians died from starvation and malnutrition in just the past 24 hours, bringing the total death toll from hunger-related causes to 175 people since the conflict began. And that includes 93 children. The fuel situation has become particularly dire. Israel allowed 4 UN fuel tankers to enter Gaza on Sunday, specifically designated to keep hospitals, bakeries, and other essential services running. Egypt's state media reported that 2 additional trucks carrying 107 tons of diesel were also preparing to cross into the territory. However, these deliveries represent just a fraction of what Gaza's 2.2 million residents desperately need. To put this in perspective, during January and February, more than 700 fuel trucks entered Gaza during a brief ceasefire period. Since March, when Israel severely restricted aid access as pressure on Hamas to release hostages, fuel shipments have been extremely rare. The Hostages Families Forum, representing relatives of those held captive, issued a powerful statement that cuts right to the heart of the matter. Hamas has been holding innocent people in impossible conditions for over 660 days. They emphasize that every hostage death will be entirely on Hamas's hands, regardless of any humanitarian gestures. Meanwhile, the violence continues unabated. Palestinian health authorities reported that at least 80 people were killed by Israeli fire and airstrikes across Gaza on Sunday alone. Some of these victims were desperately trying to reach aid distribution points when they were struck down. Among the casualties was a staff member of the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, killed when an Israeli strike hit their headquarters in Khan Yunis, igniting a fire that consumed the building's first floor. International aid efforts are ramping up, but they're proving woefully inadequate. Belgium's Air Force conducted its first humanitarian airdrop in coordination with Jordan, while France began dropping 40 tons of aid on Friday. However, UN agencies are clear. Airdrops are simply not enough to prevent mass starvation among Gaza's population. And this is where the situation becomes even more complex. COGAT, Israel's military coordination agency, reported that over 23,000 tons of humanitarian aid in 1,200 trucks entered Gaza in just the past week. Yet hundreds of these trucks haven't even been distributed to aid hubs by UN and international organizations. Even more troubling, witnesses and Hamas sources confirm that many trucks are being looted by desperate displaced people and armed gangs who have taken control of distribution routes. The Hamas-run Gaza government claims nearly 1,600 aid trucks have arrived since Israel eased restrictions in late July. But the reality on the ground tells a different story. Gaza's health ministry reports that fuel shortages have crippled hospital services so severely that doctors can only treat critically ill or injured patients. Everyone else must wait or go without care. This entire crisis stems from Hamas's October 7, 2023 attack on southern Israel, which killed more than 1,200 people and resulted in 251 hostages being taken. Israel's subsequent air and ground campaign in densely populated Gaza has killed more than 60,000 Palestinians, according to local health officials. Now here's the question that's dividing experts and policymakers. Is Hamas's offer genuine humanitarian concern, or is it a calculated political move designed to gain international sympathy while maintaining their grip on the hostages? The timing, coming immediately after the shocking hostage video, certainly raises eyebrows. What do you think? Can Hamas be trusted to follow through on humanitarian commitments when they've systematically prevented aid access for months? And should Israel halt military operations that they claim are targeting Hamas leadership and infrastructure in exchange for what might be empty promises? This isn't just about strategy. Real lives hang in the balance, and the international community is watching every move. The controversy doesn't end there. Some analysts argue that Israel's aid restrictions amount to collective punishment of Gaza's civilian population, while others contend that Hamas deliberately uses civilian suffering as a weapon against Israel. Where do you stand on this deeply polarizing issue? Share your thoughts on whether diplomatic solutions can work when both sides have such fundamentally different demands, and whether the international community is doing enough to break this deadly stalemate. European leaders condemn Hamas video of Israeli hostages, calls for ceasefire and two-state solution. The world is watching in anguish as graphic footage of Israeli captives held by Hamas sparks outrage across Europe, with leaders scrambling to condemn the boundless cruelty of the militant group. But here's where it gets controversial. How do you balance humanitarian demands with geopolitical strategy when every decision feels like a tightrope walk? Let's break it down. French President Emmanuel Macron led the charge on Sunday, calling the newly released videos of hostages Ram Breslovsky and Eviatar David a stark reminder of Hamas's unrelenting inhumanity. The footage, which showed the men visibly weakened after nearly 670 days in captivity, ignited fresh calls for a ceasefire and the immediate release of all hostages. Macron didn't stop there. He doubled down on his recent pledge to recognize a Palestinian state by September, framing it as the only viable path to lasting peace. This isn't just about ending the war, he emphasized. It's about building a future where Israel and Palestine coexist with dignity, security, and justice for all. But here's the twist. Macron's push for statehood has sparked heated debate. While he insists Hamas must be completely disarmed and excluded from governance, critics argue this stance risks normalizing the group's existence. How do we demand peace while legitimizing the very organization responsible for this horror? One analyst asked. Macron's critics, including the U.S., worry his approach muddies the waters. Yet he remains steadfast, linking Palestinian sovereignty to the broader goal of stabilizing the region. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz echoed Macron's outrage, calling the videos a sickening testament to Hamas barbarism. But unlike France, Germany's position on Palestinian statehood remains deliberately vague, a diplomatic tightrope that reflects Europe's broader struggle to unite on a coherent strategy. Meanwhile, UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy took a more direct tone, branding the footage Hamas propaganda and demanding unconditional hostage releases. "We're working toward a ceasefire and an end to aid blockades," he said, but progress is glacial. And this is the part most people miss. The U.S. is reportedly shifting tactics. White House envoy Steve Witkoff recently visited Israel, meeting with hostage families and officials. As Washington pushes for a comprehensive deal, a stark contrast to Prime Minister Netanyahu's preference for incremental releases, only one American hostage, Eden Alexander, has been freed under this new approach, raising questions about whether the Biden-Harris administration's earlier deals with Hamas were a misstep. The families are desperate for answers, Witkoff reportedly told them. We're close, but close isn't enough. So what's next? Will Macron's vision of a two-state solution gain traction, or will Hamas brutality derail peace talks? And should recognizing Palestine even be on the table while Hamas holds captives? Share your thoughts in the comments, because the path to peace is anything but simple.